Welcome to the Breakup Recovery Podcasts by your host, Barbara Stevens. Discover the wisdom and remarkable insights of Barbara Stevens, breakup recovery mentor, author, and public speaker. Barbara offers programs and solutions for any breakup so you can turn your life around, create lasting changes for the better, and embrace life again.
So I'm Barbara Stevens, and today I have Anne Louise with me today. So welcome, Anne Louise, and thank you for being willing to share your story, your insights and your ideas. So let's start at the beginning of your relationship. How did you meet your husband?
I met him when we moved and I went to school. So I knew him for a very long time, from when I was about 13.
So tell me briefly about your relationship.
We were friends, good friends. And as friends, very good relationship, which drifted into a romantic relationship.
And so how long were you together for?
All together, we didn't start going out together in school. We only started going out together when I was about 22, I suppose. So we were married, we were together for a couple of years, and then we were married for nearly 10 years. So altogether, as in a relationship sense, around about 12 or 13 years.
So what challenges would you say you had in your relationship?
Altogether, I think the biggest challenge was, there were two big challenges. One was no money. And when we first got married, he was studying full-time and working full-time, basically, and got pregnant really quickly. So that was a big challenge, which then ripple effect over the years. The other significant challenge, and probably for both of us, the other significant challenge was that the work he wound up doing took him away for extended periods of time. And even when we were together in remote sorts of areas, he worked all the time. Weekends, all the time.
So it was more like a workaholic.
Yeah, still is, in point of fact.
So can you describe your breakup to me in terms of how it affected you emotionally?
It took a long time to break up. I knew but couldn't admit out loud that I wanted out of the marriage when our son was 2.5. The marriage broke up when he was 6. So I stayed in the marriage for considerably longer than probably, perhaps I ought to have. I think the dominant feeling going on for me was guilt and responsibility. I felt guilty that he was a good guy. He is a good guy. He never hit me. He wasn't unfaithful. He didn't drink. All of those sorts of things. He's a nice man, and we're still close, actually. But he was a lousy partner. So those years, I was very lonely. He worked all the time, and we were together in different places. He adores, he loves the kids, but he was a lousy father. I was father and mother. So I was like a single woman, for pretty much all of our married life, I suppose. So those kind of years in between, a realisation in myself that I was miserable and didn't love him anymore, really, pretty much. Stayed there feeling guilty and then hid from it. So I pretended it wasn't happening. Not at the time, I didn't know that, but I think I just buried myself in stuff. I got busy and life took over, and it's easy to ignore it if you're busy. So I ignored it. I think a lot of guilt, though, because he's a good person, and I felt very guilty. And it was really, I can't tell you what brought it to a head. Just somewhere in there, I stopped ignoring it, I suppose. And then it was, big feelings of responsibility. Every time I thought about it, I couldn't get past worrying about the kids and worrying about his parents and worrying about my mother and worrying about, him, everybody but me, really, pretty much. And that kept me there and for quite a long time. But that was the dominant feeling. Loneliness in the marriage, deep level of loneliness. Breaking up, that period of time where the marriage was coming unstuck, was a lot of guilt. Nearly stepped in front of a bus one day. I was very close and just thought everyone would be better off.
Just pure guilt. Anne Louise, did you go to him and say, it's over, I can't do this anymore? So when that happened, was he shocked, or did he think it was coming?
He was deeply shocked and angry, and it was all my fault, of course. So it was pretty terrible. We did manage, and I think because we'd been friends for such a very long time, we did manage to agree that we'd put the kids' well-being first, and that meant that our own agendas were second. It was, I don't suppose there's any such thing as a good breakup. It was a terrible, horrible time.
Did he want to work on the marriage? Anne Louise, did he say, what's wrong? How can I fix it? Shall we go to counselling? Was he willing to work?
Yes, he would have done all of those things. But unfortunately, I left it. By the time I was able to say it out loud and confront it with him, by the time we got there, I was actually out of the marriage. I had already left. I was just going through the motions. So there was no point actually and I didn't want to. I couldn't see the point. Well, there wasn't a point. It wasn't even on the agenda.
So how do you feel now?
I probably wish that I had confronted it earlier, when my son was 2.5. I probably, if I had my time over again, I would have confronted the whole thing earlier. In truth, I think really I drifted into a marriage. I think the truth for me was I wasn't actually in love with him. I drifted into a marriage that was comfortable and familiar and all of those things. So in some respects, I suppose I'm different to other women. But yes, that's probably the one thing that I would do differently. I would have confronted it earlier.
Have you got any tips or strategies for other women that are going through their breakup?
Get a good counsellor. Get someone, and there are a lot of bad counsellors out there, I think. One of the biggest challenges for me was I couldn't actually get past how guilty I felt. Every time I thought about it, I had this just drowning in everybody else's feelings, and the guilt was just overwhelming. The best piece of advice, I went to 2 counsellors. The best piece of advice I got was actually a technique that she gave me. I'm a pictorial learner. And she said to me, you must look after yourself. You've got to figure it out for yourself. And she said, in order to do that, you've got to stop worrying about everybody else. So the technique that she gave me was to close my eyes and picture in my head every time someone, whether it was my kids or my parents-in-law or my mother or whoever, every time I felt worried for them and worried about how they would cope and all of those things, I shut my eyes and I projected their head onto the television and I walked over and turned it off. And I did it, and eventually that became automatic. And the minute I thought about anyone except myself, when I was trying to figure out a way through, I just did that. And it became the biggest saviour for me. I would never have gotten through it. I simply would never have gotten through it without being able to move past worrying about everybody else, because you can't look after yourself until you can stop worrying about all the other stuff, and you've got to get through. So I think find someone that is good and someone who has the right approach for you. I went to 2 counsellors. One was just no good for me. The approach didn't work. The counsellor was really about, I couldn't sort it out in my head. I couldn't see my way clear to leave. Couldn't see my way clear to stay. I was just really confused. So that's really what they did for me. They helped me to clarify my thinking about things and to find the strength to do, what needed to be done, really. No, the best of all of the things, it was that one tool that really stands out as the thing that saved me, and it did. It really did.
Have you ever used that tool again in your life?
I haven't needed to. I think probably confront your feelings as soon as you can. It was a very long time between 2.5 and 6. Long time.
Do you think it's part of your nature and that's how you've dealt with problems in the past? Has it been difficult for you to actually verbalise what is going on
Absolutely.
with you? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a deeply non-confrontational person. All of that is about confrontation. It's about putting yourself first. I learned all through my life to, that not to do that. I think my natural personality, my natural being probably is a helpful kind of, and I think as a kid I was always like that. But I didn't learn any tools from my mother at all in that sense. Our family were very much elephant in the room. You didn't talk about stuff, and there was no, it's interesting, friends, and even as a teenager probably, there was big discussions around the table about stuff, politics and religion and all that kind of stuff. There was none of that in our house. It was a very non-useful in terms of...
Non-confrontational family.
Very much so. Not without arguments. My parents did argue, but there just wasn't, there weren't tools. And I don't know, maybe that's not what happens in other families. Maybe parents don't ever think about giving their kids tools to deal with stuff. But I certainly was ill-equipped, I think, very badly equipped to deal with, what comes with a marriage and kids.
Sounds like, Anne Louise, you almost went into a depressive state about the breakup and the end of your relationship. Would you say that happened to you? You didn't get that far down into depression?
No, I never was depressed, but I think I ran away. I don't think my dealing with it wasn't depression. I think my dealing with it was, I was 35. I kicked my heels up. That was how I dealt with it. I think I moved on very fast. But see, I'd waited for such a long time. So when the breakup happened, I was way gone. I was looking in the pub. I remember talking to a really close friend of mine who'd been through a marriage breakup, and our girls were our best friends. I went to her one day and I was just a mess. And we'd talked about it before, but I'd started looking in the paper at alternative accommodation, and I was ready to ring and she just said to me, she said, you've got to slow down. I hadn't even broached it, with him at all. And she said to me, she said that you've got to put one step ahead of the other. And, she said you can't just go to him and say, I've moved out into a unit. So, she was a steadying kind of an influence, but it was just a symptom of the fact that it was, not retrievable, probably.
And how's your relationship now with your ex-husband?
Oh, good, yeah. Yeah, I think we're as lucky as any couple, and my kids, both of them, would say to you that they feel very fortunate that we managed it the way we did. We made a quite clear agreement to put the kids first, and not that we didn't each fall off the perch here and there, with a bit of a slanging match and a bit of a this and a bit of that. But fundamentally, we managed to put our own agenda second and keep the kids' agenda at the top. So for them, that meant that there were never any games around visitation or any of that stuff. There was no using them as leverage ever. So I think that if anyone who hears this can keep that in their minds and respect, if you can do that, what you hopefully, and it won't always be the case, but at the other end of it, if you can maintain that respect and keeping the kids first, then what you will come out with has got to be better than the other option. And we're very fortunate that we managed to hang on to the friendship. It's not perfect, but we're very fortunate, and we see one another. He and his girlfriend were here at Christmas time, on the way through, so they popped in and we had dinner together, and we're very, very fortunate to have left with that. I would be interested, and I probably know the answer. If you spoke to him, he would look back and see that he is still a deeply selfish person, and in our marriage, he was a very selfish person. So, for me, if I'd have been better at putting my hand up, then things might have been different.
They might have also caused more confrontation.
Well, probably would have left earlier. I have a great partner. I'm married again, and he is a really good partner. I think it's really, there's light, out there. And
you found your voice.
Yeah, I found my voice. And I'm older too, that's the other thing. I was very young. When we got married, I'd never lived with other people even. I'd never even flattered with another person. I went into marriage with someone with no experience on almost every level you want to look at it. Hopefully at the other end of life you've got a little bit of experience in, a fair amount of stuff. Not that we do it perfectly by any means, but yes, I think that going into a marriage without much experience is not necessarily very good.
So thank you for your honesty today, Anne Louise. Thank you for sharing your ideas and your tips and your strategies, and thank you for being with me today.
My pleasure, Barb. I hope it helps someone.
If you would like to hear previous Breakup Recovery podcasts, visit barbarastevens.com.au. Connect with Barbara Stevens on social media with Barbara Stevens Breakup Recovery Mentor on Facebook and at You'll Be Okay on Twitter. Read further blogs, view webinar replays, and download your free ebook, 3 Easy Steps to Surviving Your Breakup, and much more at barbarastevens.com.au.